Hello all you people out there in TV land. My name is CB Studios, also known as Kurt, and today we're going to jump in and I'm going to show you a quick look at my homemade Mandalorian. This is the way. Now, couple of quick facts before we start with this. Mando's pretty much entirely homemade. I spent an awful lot of time building this. I actually built it back in 2022 and I only finally wore it to a convention about a week and a half ago. This guy is mostly 3D printed, so if you don't have a 3D printer, there may not be a whole lot of information that I can give you. However, there is a lot of scratch build parts in here, and really, this isn't a tutorial, it's a breakdown of what I did. If you have questions, drop them in the comments. I'm always happy to talk shop about Star Wars cosplays, but I guess let's strip everything off the mannequin and get started. First up, the helmet. Now, my helmet that I use for my Mando is literally just a Star Wars Hasbro Black Series helmet. I really like this helmet for the price. You can pick it up for about $200 Australian if you know where to look. You can get them secondhand on Marketplace, nice and cheap. If you live in a place where the dollar is slightly better for you, you can pick them up even cheaper than that. I think they're about $110 in the United States. Now, this has not had any modifications done to it. We've just had some slight weathering in the cheeks and around all the seams on the helmet just to give some extra depth. This is the stock paint job. It's incredibly nice, very shiny. It's a slightly sharper look to the helmet than the helmet does have in the show, but honestly, that's fine by me. Also comes with this cool little interchangeable earpiece. It's got a little LED light in there to mimic his helmet light from Season 2. But because I wear Mando from Season 1, you don't really need to worry about that. But that's my helmet. It's not had much in the way of modifications to the inside. This is pretty much all stock except for those 3 pads of whitey yellowy foam. And that's just because I find the stock helmet liner things that Hasbro include aren't amazing. Visibility in this is awesome, and it's actually really comfortable to wear. So that's my helmet. The next most important part of my costume is the flight suit. Now, there are multiple options on what sort of flight suit you can go with, but when I started this costume, I wanted to do it on the cheap. So I used a pair of King G work coveralls, long sleeve, one-piece Michael Myers coveralls I actually had them for. And I've cut and shot it. I've removed the pants from the lower part, so it's sort of a shirt. We have the doubled over sleeve pieces here. I've added in Velcro for the armor, shoulder pads in there to give a little bit more of a squarer frame, and I removed the collar and made an X seal out of the collar for that. It press snaps down the front, which is fine because that's covered by the Flack Vest, but it's actually a very nice and fairly comfortable way to wear this costume. It also didn't cost me anything because I already owned it. The pants are also the same. I did a lot more work to the pants than I did for the shirt. I've sewn in a bunch of the panel lines that are exhibited on Mando's suit, including this inner thigh piece, the knee piece, and everything like that. I've got big panels of Velcro stitched to the thighs for the thigh armor, and I sewed in some webbing luggage straps that crisscross across the back, and that holds them up like a pair of suspenders. Makes things really nice. It's adjustable, but it's also quick release, so it's easy to get in and out of. We have some Velcro on the waist and then press snaps further down. And down on the bottom, we've actually got a Velcro closure here that pins the legs in nice and tight to stop them from coming out of the shin guards. It's a very good idea. That's my bodysuit, cheap and nasty. Next up, we have the Flack Vest. This is just kind of a weird little crop top thing. Now, I built this out of some cotton broadcloth, which was nice, cheap cotton that I bought down at my local fabric supplier. It's got some vinyl straps on the shoulders, which is fairly accurate for the show. It's a little difficult to tell. You can see that I've got some quilted lines sewn into the front as there's padding in this. We have press snaps up on the top edge to attach my cape to, and then we have Velcro on the front and on the back to hold my armor on. Now, you'll see that there's a big Velcro seam down the back. This makes this whole thing adjustable. And originally, this was how I planned to get in and out of the costume before I added the back plate that he does have. So, under the arms, I've got some open-ended zippers that allow me to put the whole thing on in one go by myself. That's the Flack Vest. A further piece of the costume is the cummerbund. Now, originally I'd done a padded one, but because I'm already fairly padded around the midsection anyway, this is my version 2, and it is just flat fabric. It's nice and easy to wear. we do have the quilted lines sewn in, and unfortunately we've lost a little bit of the weathering since I did have to wash this as it got very, very sweaty and stinky. But this is very, very close to what's seen in the show. It's nice and simple. It's just a big piece of fabric that wraps around the waist. We do have the same zipper and Velcro attachment system that I have for the Flack Vest, which A, makes this adjustable, and B, makes it much, much easier to get into. Now on the inside, if we flip the whole thing around, you can see some white Velcro and some black Velcro. The white Velcro is where my Hippauldrons attach to, and then the black Velcro in the back is where my kidney plate attaches to. And so pretty much all of my armor is attached by Velcro to this costume. Makes it very easy to wear, easy to put on, and easy to adjust if it does need to be adjusted. My Mando cape. Now this cape doesn't look like much, but she's got it where it counts. This is just an old wool blanket that my mum happened to have, as she makes some awesome clothes out of old woolen blankets. And it's kind of moth-eaten in areas. We've got some holes and some stains. We've got a whole lot of weathering down on the bottom edge, which is great. We do have a seam down the middle of the back, but honestly, I don't mind because this was free. I just sort of sewed it and glued it into the shape that we needed for around Mando's neck, and you'll see this on the mannequin towards the end. And just underneath, we've got some press snaps, and that attaches this to the Flack Vest. Everything holds in place, and this bottom edge is hidden by the chest armor. Final piece of soft goods we have is my neck seal. Now, as this was still a budget project, I actually used the old collar of the King G work suit, and this one just wraps around and Velcros in the back. We've got some nylon lining and some nylon for the skirting underneath. Now this sits underneath the top part of my flight suit and allows me a whole lot of independent movement for the neck. Covers my neck and covers also where any sort of balaclava sits, but just allows me a little bit more comfort with that. That's the end of my soft parts. Now onto the fun stuff. Starting off for the fun parts, we have the chest and back armor. Now my chest armor is 3D printed. These were files that I found on Thingiverse. And this was the easiest way I could think of getting this chest armor, as there's a couple of really interesting sort of angles and shapes and bits and pieces. Din Djarin's chest armor for the Pre-Beskar look tends to be fairly similar to a lot of the generic Mandalorian armor from the Mando TV show. We are in 6 pieces, as you can see. There's a big horizontal seam. We have a vertical seam down all pieces, and then this bottom section here is actually separate. We're attached by Velcro to the chest armor, and we've got some elastic that holds everything in place, holds this bottom piece in place and allows some movement. The center chest diamond is resin 3D printed as opposed to filament 3D printed, and has been covered in aluminium tape to give that nice metal look. It's all been painted and weathered. There are paint charts that show all of the exact colors to be used for Din Djarin's armor, and I ignored pretty much all of those because I was doing this on a budget. This was a brown and an orange spray paint that I sort of misted together, added some black, and did all my layers of weathering, and it's turned out really, really nice, and I really like the color that this has. The back plate, this was scratch built out of Sintra. Now, if you've seen my Beetlejuice sign video, you know what Sintra is, but this is a foamed PVC board. It's a big sheet of very easy to cut, lightweight plastic that can be heat formed. And so I used patterns from The Welding Geek to make my backplate, and just heated it and shaped it and glued it and sanded and painted and made it look pretty close to what Din Djarin's armor looks like. This is hidden mostly by the cape, however you do see the top edge under my cape, so I did want it to still be there because Din has it, and I felt it was important. But there's only a little piece of Sintra that was needed. It's double layered to get that thicker look, and it really helps sell the whole illusion that I am wearing a full set of armor on my chest and back. Next up for the armor, we have shoulder plates. Now you'll notice that I have 2 shoulders, but 3 shoulder plates, and I'm going to tell you why. For the left shoulder plate, we have one 3D printed piece. This is the same as the Death Watch Mandalorians. It just Velcros onto the flight suit. It's much like the rest of the Death Watch Mandalorians, and it's painted in the same paint scheme as the chest armor and also one of the thighs. It's the same brown with silver and grays and all that lovely, lovely weathering. And I've just got some foam on the inside and some Velcro. And it Velcros onto the shoulder of the flight suit, and it's just armor. It's one piece of 3D printed armor, and I really, really like how this looks. Now for the right shoulder, we have 2 pieces of armor. For the initial opening of Season 1, Episode 1 Mando, so the full Durasteel Bitzer Mando, he actually is wearing one of these, which is a Shore Trooper shoulder plate. Now, I do absolutely love the Shore Trooper armor from Rogue One and from Andor, and I eventually am going to 3D print a full set of that armor. I've printed the helmet, but I'd printed a shoulder bell as a test and had a bunch of the accurate paint anyway. And so I went through and painted one up, and that's rigged so I can actually swap it out for my Din Djarin shoulder. But I had then been testing out some silver for a Nameless Ghoul project, and I'd already printed many, many months ago the Beskar shoulder plate for Din Djarin. And honestly, while I love the very initial outing, as I did see this costume in person at D23 before Mando premiered, the Beskar kind of won out because it matches really, really nicely with my helmet. Now this is just painted with some Dulux paints and some clear coats, and it's turned out really, really nice and shiny. I'm very happy with this. And again, these are just 3D printed plastic pieces. One piece for the Beskar shoulder and 2 pieces for the Shore Trooper. Having the options to change things around is really, really fun, and it's the spice of life. It allows me to throw some different looks together and really capture all the stuff that I like about Mando. Next up we have gauntlets and gloves. I'll talk about the gloves after I've talked about the gauntlets. Now the gauntlets are about the only pieces that I didn't make myself on this costume. These are 3D printed pieces, printed by Weirdy Beardy Creations, because he has a CR10 and it's a much bigger printer than I had. So these are printed in 2 pieces. And we do have an underside and a top side, and they Velcro down on the inside of the arm. We've got a nice little keypad on the left arm and some aluminium tape detailing on that and a little chip above it. And then on the right, we have this little blacked out screen, and we've got our Mando darts. Now these are just a generic Death Watch Mando model. I didn't go for screen accurate Mando because Mando actually has a flamethrower on this arm, and I know for a fact I'm going to get that caught and rip it off. In fact, these little darts you can see here are cast in pewter, as we all know and love working with pewter. Originally, when I'd received these, I had resin printed some darts that fit in there exactly, and after about 30 minutes of having those darts in place, I'd snapped 3 out of the 4 of them off. So this has actually been modeled as one solid block, and you can just see a seam line there. It's one solid block of pewter. They're about 3/4 round and then have a base, and that's all epoxied in place. And it looks really, really nice. And because it's painted black underneath, you can't tell that it's one piece and not 4 individual darts. They're my gauntlets. They're really, really comfortable. They just sit on my wrists, clamshell around, and they hold everything in place. The things they hold in place are the gloves. Now, these are just a pair of leather gloves. In fact, they were one of my original Papa Emeritus gloves. And in the interest of doing things on the cheap, I'd used a couple of yellow Wells Lamont leather work gloves to do the fingertips, and everything's just sort of cut and then glued in place. There's a vinyl cuff that I've added to extend to cover over my wrists. And then on the back of the hands, we have a resin printed handguard that was then molded, and then these are cast in a high impact polyurethane resin and painted. These fit really well. They're very, very comfortable and low profile, and the extended cuff means that the wrist of the gloves doesn't pull out from under the gauntlets. They're really, really nice, and I had no issues wearing these around at the con. Very, very comfortable. Next up, as we continue down the armor, we have the Hippauldrons and the kidney plate. The kidney plate is painted in that same brown and orange and silver paint job that the rest of my chest armor is. It is 2 layers of Sintra, and you can see a big strip of Velcro at the top. It just sits down, basically covers my butt. It's a butt plate. It's very, very good. There's not much to say about this. It's really simple. The Hippauldrons are actually made out of EVA foam. I wanted something that was light, comfortable, and flexible for my Hippauldrons, as they really do take a fair amount of beating, and they're in a very high movement area. These Velcro onto the cummerbund, much like the kidney plate, and they are painted with Plastidip and then several layers of acrylic spray paint over the top. There is some light silver weathering, and then we do have sort of a dry brushing of sand color in there just to even everything out. Very dark blue, they almost look like a slate gray, but these are really, really nice, and they're one of the first armor pieces that I built because I've got a lot of experience building with EVA foam. It's a great way to do your Hippauldrons if you're on a budget and you're looking for something that's going to be durable. Moving down, we have the Pre-Beskar thighs. Now these were built just basically by eye. I used reference from a couple of the action figures as well as pictures of the costume on display. These are layered Sintra, again, because it's cheap, it's light, and I was not looking to 3D print big flat pieces. We have the left thigh, which is painted in the same sand, it's actually Sahara beige, as the Shore Trooper armor, so that paint was coming in handy. We've got some grey and silver battle damage, and then we've been weathered with some browns to give that sort of aged look. This velcros just onto the thigh of the flight suit, holds in place really nicely, and because they're light, it doesn't drag everything down. The right thigh is exactly the same as every other piece of brown armor you've seen for this suit. It's that same sort of mission brown misted with the orange. We've got silver for the battle damage. We've got some chunks out of there as well. It's actually textured and deep, which is really nice. 2 layers of Sintra for this one. And we do have a nice big pieces of Velcro to hold this onto the thighs as well. You can also see some unintentional battle damage up here, which is a really, really good sign. If you have painted your armor with silver as a base coat first, and then done your layered paint over the top, if you wear paint through, it's going to wear through to silver. This was from where I had my dark saber hanging off my belt, and it was rubbing against this shin armor, and actually took a bunch of paint off the armor and a bunch of paint off the dark saber, but we'll get to that in a little bit. That's the thighs. As we move down Mando, we have the left knee. Now, much like Boba Fett, Mando has a knee pad. In fact, he only has one knee pad, as the Shore Trooper armor that you'll see in a moment covers the right knee. This one goes on his left knee. This is a 3D printed piece. The file I got off Thingiverse. It was free, which is lovely. We have our nice Mando knee dance on the side, which was a resin 3D printed piece that I've molded and then cast in pewter. They're actually epoxied and then screwed on, and it really gives this nice aged look. I'll give you some close-ups at the end. I'm very, very proud of this. It's painted with a teal blue spray paint that I actually had for a Captain America shield project many years ago, and has that same grey and silver weathering patterns. I really wish that I'd carved in some of the battle damage so that it wasn't just flat, but honestly, nobody's going to notice if they're looking at your knees, and I'm really, really happy with how this looks. This velcros onto the knee of the flight suit, and then has an elastic strap that doubles over at the back, holding everything in place. This is the only part of the costume throughout the course of the con that rubbed. This is the only piece that was slightly uncomfortable, and it was this corner right here. What I'll do in the future is I'm going to sew a pad of foam into the back of the knee, inside the flight suit, and that should solve all the issues. Now we're getting to the fun parts, and this is one of the pieces that falls apart on a lot of the straight-off-the-rack cosplay suits. We've got the shins. I'm going to talk about these individually because there's a lot to talk about. The left shin is completely custom made. This is completely made from scratch. Really, really fun, and I'm super proud of this. This is a big piece of 6mm EVA foam that wraps around my leg, and the entire thing is skinned in leather. Now, this costume actually has a deceptively large amount of leatherwork involved in it, and I'd ordered some really, really nice chocolate brown, very thin, I think sheep leather or sheepskin leather. I'd basically used foam dowels and made the wrinkled look that he has, and basically covered the whole thing in contact adhesive and bonded it down. We've got a big Velcro seam up the back of the leg. We've got some leather belting along the top that's all been stitched into place, and this is glued over more layered of that brown, the chocolate brown sheep leather. We've got our little pouch on the top, which does open. Very, very nice. I don't keep anything in there, but you could. We Velcro along the top as well, which holds this closed. We've got the tombstone piece, which is a piece of veg tan leather, same as the rest of this belting on here, just with a different dye application. And down the bottom we have our little pleated ankle skirt. And this covers the top of the boots. I really like how this piece looks. It's really light and it's very flexible, which is great, but still holds its shape really, really well and just helps sell the look that he's really heavily armored. Now, the right shin is one of my favorite pieces of this costume for several reasons. The base of this armor is actually a fiberglass piece of Stormtrooper leg armor. I've got a full set of Stormtrooper armor that I bought off a friend for absolute steal. I will eventually be making a Mimban Stormtrooper suit. Really, it should be a Shore Trooper leg piece, and I do have the files for that, so I'll eventually 3D print it. But for the moment, it's fiberglass. We've got more of that chocolate brown, really thin leather for this bottom strap here. We have a shin guard made out of Sintra. That's this raised piece on the front. There's a 3D printed Shore Trooper knee plate up on the top here. This arm has been painted in that same chocolate mission brown. But the ammo canisters on this leg are my favorite part of this costume. The belting for this is all veg tan leather for the strapping. So that's all leather that I've cut and dyed and shaped with that nice chocolate brown leather as an underlayer. Everything Velcros at the back, holding the leg closed, which is great. And then we have our canisters. Now these, I'd originally 3D printed in resin in the interests of saving money, but let's focus. Yeah. These are machined in 25mm aluminium bar stock. I think it's 25mm, something along that. These have been machined out of some aluminium bar stock by my dad, who you will remember if you've seen my Luke Skywalker lightsaber video, or my holiday special lightsaber video, or my Jack Sparrow compass video. He's helped with an awful lot of stuff, but I traded him some labor sanding the side of his boat. In return, he machined me all of the aluminium canisters on this costume. These pieces are really heavy, but nothing looks like real metal more than real metal. These are perfectly sized to fit in the strapping on this leg, and honestly, it was one of the things that people commented on the most because it just looks legit. It makes the leg look huge. These look really nice and functional, and there's just the icing on the cake of a really cool armor piece. That's it for the armor. Let's move on to some more fun stuff. One of the most recent pieces that I made for this costume, actually in anticipation for Supernova Convention, was the boots. Now, Mando's boots are specific. You can find the exact type of Skechers boots online if you go looking. I did not bother. I'm going to put one of these down. I bought a pair of cheap steel cap work boots from our local Kmart, which still exists here in Australia. I am from Australia for those of you playing at home. I'd originally just airbrushed over the seams and made it look kind of like they were weathered Mando boots. But really, they finished at about here. They weren't as high as I wanted. They didn't have the details that I wanted. And I ended up picking up some skins of pigskin leather and spent basically an afternoon, made some patterns, and made an accurate boot topper for Mando's boots. These are one of my favorite parts of the costume because they really sell that this is a full, complete Mando suit. They gave me a bit of extra height in there as well. I've got some lifts inside the boots because I'm a fucking short ass. And it helps with the proportions a little bit as well. They're not 100% accurate, but goddamn do they look cool. And look at how cool they look with the armor. We've got the nice grey panels on the inside of the leg there. It velcros over to hold everything in place. And these have held up really, really well. I'm super, super, super happy with them. They look great. Those are my boots. As we move through Mando, we come to one of my favorite parts, the belt. Now, Mando's belt is the same throughout the entire season, and I'm really glad with that because I fucking love this design. This thing was pretty much entirely scratch built by me. I'm really proud of it. I used patterns that are online from Deborah DeMayo, who does make and sell leather Mando pieces. But everything on this was basically made by me, with the exception of these lovely canisters. I bet you can't guess where they came from. Yep, at the same time, Dad machined up the canisters for me. We've got 10 of them on the belt and bandolier. We have a nice aluminium buckle here, which is just a sheet of aluminium that I'd carved down. And on the back, I've got a functional Cobra buckle. Yeah. So that's how I get in and out of this belt. We have our nice pouch on the front, which has got a couple of coins from Johnny Ruckus. We have our resin 3D printed mines on a big sheet of aluminium with a leather pouch around the outside. This is actually really over-engineered. It's all drilled and tapped, so it all screws onto the belt. It can't come off. These are drilled and tapped to hold onto the aluminium plate. It's ridiculous. I love it. I'm very, very proud. Our back plate we have is actually a buckle from Tandy Leather. This belt from here is adjustable. We've got a screw here and a screw here, and they actually hold the whole belt together. So I can adjust it smaller for my mannequin or larger for me because I am not mannequin sized. On the inside of the belt, we have 2 patches of Velcro, and that is to attach our bandolier. Now the bandolier is the same veg tan leather. It has Velcro on either end to attach to the belt, and this whole thing was built using patterns from Deborah DeMayo. We have an extendable elastic piece in the back, which allows for a little bit of flexibility and movement. We have more of our lovely canisters, and I cannot state how much these just elevate all of the leatherwork. It's so nice. We also have this nice little steel and aluminium plate up in the top here. This is what the Mando long-range pulse rifle or phase rifle or whatever it's called. I don't know, a big-ass tuning fork gun. This actually attaches onto here with a nice little leather strap and a magnet. We'll touch on that in a second. But this is the bandolier, and together with the belt, it just really sells this as being one hell of a costume. Our final piece for the belt, before we get onto that bandolier accessory piece, is my holster and pistol. Now, the holster is again built with those Deborah DeMayo patterns. We are just built out of scraps of leather that I had laying around and dyed to match. And inside, we have Mando's pistol. Nothing super special about this one. This is a really lightweight rubies prop. In fact, there's no moving parts and this thing weighs less than a can of Coke. It's just painted to match and fits perfectly inside the holster. You can pick them up if you're in the States for like 12 bucks at your Halloween stores. If you're in Australia, expect to pay in excess of $50 for something like this. I managed to get one really cheap, but they don't show up much. This just loops over my belt and sits on the right hip. It's nice and straightforward and very, very fun. Well, seeing as we were talking about weapons, this is the long-range Ambon Phase Pulse Rifle from The Mandalorian. It's very large, as we can get everything in here. And this, funnily enough, is made by Nerf. This is a giant fucking Nerf gun. Now, there are two versions of this blaster that have been made available. There's this one, which is the cheaper one, and then they made a higher-end collectible one that's, instead of having foam tuning forks on the end, it's got plastic, and it's a different color scheme, and the scope lights up, and it makes sounds. This thing was like 80 bucks. It's really good for the price, and because I was going to paint it and not really play with it as a Nerf gun, I didn't need to get the expensive one. A couple of things that I've modified with this. Comes with a little wimpy D-ring, but I've replaced that with an accurate rifle sling. There you go, we've got that. We have this lovely leather strap that attaches via magnet to our bandolier. We've got some leather wrap around this section of the barrel because I thought that would look nice. And most importantly, this whole thing does still work as a Nerf gun. Nerf darts go in, close, that cocks it. Oh yeah. It's got some fairly terrible range, but it paints up really, really nicely. And because it's a Nerf gun, it's nice and light. So it sits on the back of Mando's armor really comfortably. Gives a really, really cool look. And I mean, Nerf even went through and did the wood grain on the stock. And, you know, that it was cast in brown, so all I had to do was a black wash. They've done a really, really nice job. I didn't bother taking off the Star Wars or Nerf detailing, and I've obviously left it fairly con-safe with the giant orange tuning forks. But I didn't even take this to Gold Coast Supernova just because of how awkward and long it is. But I will take it out for a shoot when I do a proper shoot out in the wilderness. The final piece of Mando's arsenal is the Dark Saber. Now, there's a bunch of videos about Darksabers online, and I just went for the one that was easiest for me to get, and that is the Hasbro Black Series Darksaber. This thing has a blade that goes in. You've actually got to use an Allen key to try and get this end piece off. The whole thing slides in. It's really cool. It's got lights, it's got sounds, it's really heavy, and I've got a whole lot of weathering along the edge of my guard because it was rubbing as it was hanging from my belt. The Darksaber is really, really fun, but it's not super accurate for Pre-Beskar Mando, so that's all we're going to say about that one. And finally, what would The Mandalorian be without the child? Now, my Grogu is just one of the Mattel soft toy Grogus. He's got vinyl head and vinyl hands. At the moment, he's pretty much unmodified, but I will eventually put a wire skeleton in him so he can be posed. I've also been suggested to put a magnet in his hand so he can hold the little blue and silver ball gear shift knob from the Razor Crest. The bag is just one of those standard sort of cotton canvas army satchels. It's got this 3D printed detail on the front, which is from Thingiverse, and it's just been weathered up. So one of my favorite things was walking around with this little guy sitting on my left hip because he's super adorable and kept trying to eat every frog we saw. That's Grogu. Alright, so now that we've seen that whole thing, I'm going to chuck it all on the mannequin and give you an overview of how the whole thing looks together. So we're going to go into time-lapse mode and you're going to watch me assemble some stuff onto an amorphous white blob in the background. So, hope you guys are enjoying that. Let's go. And there you have it. You watched me struggle with the mannequin a little bit, and one of the things that I've just learned is that my new boots, because they've got a boot cover on both sides of the elastic, I can't get them over the foot to put them on the mannequin. There's a couple of parts of the costume that actually won't fit on the mannequin. They're really just the boots and the gloves. Now, the hand plates for the gloves do Velcro onto the armor there, but that's about the best we can do. You can see the large ambient phase pulse rifle on the back of the Mando there. We've got that nice shoulder clip. We're good. This whole costume overall is one of the most comfortable costumes that I own, and I'm not entirely sure how that happened for being a full armor costume, but I'm absolutely stoked with it. I'm going to give you some final looks at the whole thing, and then, yeah, basically I'm going to throw in a couple of the worn shots right at the very end. But if you made it this far in the video, I want to thank you very, very much for watching with this. I've put a lot of work into this costume, and I'm really, really proud of it. It's actually the first time I've worn Star Wars armor to a convention since way back in 2005, prior to the release of Star Wars Revenge of the Sith, which is insane to really think that. I absolutely love how this armor's turned out. I'm really, really proud of it, and hopefully this video has given you some ideas on how to make a budget Mando of your own. Basically, a lot of this was scrounged and scavenged parts, which is very, very Mandalorian. Thank you very much for watching, guys, and check out the final looks, and see you next time. This is the way.